Hi everybody, welcome to Tropical Encounters. This is another Como Live event funded by the Legacy Amendment, and my name is Karen, and I'm one of the horticulture team that takes care of the plants here, and I want to tell you today about how we take care of the plants in an exhibit where we also have animals present. So it's pretty different than other kinds of planted areas that we tend to over in the Marjorie McNeely Conservatory. So Tropical Encounters is actually an immersive exhibit which is meant to be a South American tropical forest. So you'll see many different plant species from tropical Americas intermixed and around with lots of birds. We see poison dart frogs, there's a sloth, there's lots and lots of different animals to see as you walk through here. There's also a research station in the middle of the exhibit. So this is basically somebody's research project to look at the animals and the care of the plants and how they interact with each other. To take care of this exhibit, though, as a horticulturist, has some special considerations, especially because of the animals. So in here, we're not allowed to use any pesticides. We don't want to damage any of the animals or birds. So we use all biological or beneficial insects to control any pests that we have. We do a lot of hand watering in here to keep the climate very, very tropical. So this particular space is kept at about 72 degrees at the low end. So in the summer when you come here, it can be quite warm and quite humid. There's a computer system that runs all the venting and the misting and the heating in this space. So we also have the ability to keep the humidity quite high, which these tropical plants really like. So a few things I want to start showing you are, I'm going to bring the camera over here to kind of a neat story with this tree. This is called a Sucropia tree, and in its natural habitat, this tree has a hollow trunk, and within that trunk there are special ants that live, and what happens if something lands or tries to eat this plant, those ants will swarm out and protect their plant and their food source, because this plant produces little sugar globules on the undersides of the leaves called Belchian bodies, and that feeds the ants. So it's kind of like a nice symbiotic relationship between the ants and this tree. Now we probably don't have those ants in our exhibit here, but that's their natural habitat. So as we continue through the exhibit, I want to point out a few special things. We're coming to what we call a Rainforest Giant, and this would be a tree that has grown in the rainforest, which could be over 100 feet tall. It has fallen down. We have the roots sticking up in the air. We've opened up a light gap at the very end, and in that kind of a situation, once the light is let into this kind of area, a lot of little seedling plants will grow, and finally you'll have some new plants coming to replace the fallen Rainforest Giant. Another really interesting growth or pattern of growth is the way epiphytes will grow on top of branches, both in canopy but also on these upper roots that are sticking up in the air now. And these are lots of bromeliads. We've got some orchids, some vines. These plants grow on top of other plants. So they don't hurt the plant, but they use it for support, and then they're reaching up and getting the light because they're higher up. And I mentioned epiphytes as an interesting plant to talk about because you see it in tropical areas quite a bit. And right here next to me, I have kind of another neat story about a tropical plant in the rainforest. So there are two trees here, and the large-leafed tree is called a strangler fig. And what happens in nature is a bird or a monkey will eat a fig plant or fruit, and then as nature takes its course, perhaps those seeds will drop out, land up in a tree canopy, and then roots will start to grow down the side of the tree and gradually, as time passes, can strangle the tree underneath. So it basically will form its own root system using the base tree as a support. And then even way down here, you can see how the roots are starting to actually form a trunk. I can move this a little bit if you can see that, and will gradually form a trunk of this ficus tree. So we're just kind of letting nature take its course here with this ficus tree. So I want to show you something neat about the ground in the exhibit here. So the planters in here are all going down to the earth. So there's no bottom to them. So we're able to water them very, very thoroughly. The soil mix is made up of black dirt, peat, sand, and some compost. We wanted a fairly heavy mix because we have a lot of light in here. So we wanted the mix to hold the moisture for a while. We also wanted the mix to have a little weight to hold some of our bigger trees. But what's happening in our planter beds, the same as it would in a tropical forest, is some of our tropical trees are putting out buttress roots. So in the rainforest, the level of nutritional good soil is usually pretty shallow. So to make up for that, tropical trees will often grow wide buttress roots that will hold the tree and gather the nutrition. And so otherwise the trees might fall down a little more often, but this keeps them nice and stable. So since our exhibit has been here for about 15 years planted, a lot of our trees are actually getting nice and old and are forming some of these really cool looking buttress roots. I think we're going to go around the corner past the research station here, and I want to show you our Kpop tree. So one thing that we have to do while we're working in here is always be aware that there could be some poison dart frogs or birds or little creatures, even hermit crabs sometimes in the planter bed. So whenever we do any work, we have to be really mindful of that. We also have to be really mindful of the birds and their nesting patterns. So with tropical trees in an exhibit like this, we have a ceiling, and in some of the areas, if you look up here, you can see that the tree is actually pressed up on our glass. So that becomes something that we gradually have to cut down and deal with, but we have to be really careful to time it so that we're not interfering with the birds nesting. We also have to worry about birds' territories. So if we work in one area, we have to be careful not to work in another area too close, and we have to space things out, working with the zookeepers to make sure that we're doing nothing to harm the animals or birds in the exhibit. I want to show you another tall tree that we have in here called a Kpop tree. This is the tallest point in our exhibit. It gets about 64 feet going all the way up to the glass in our tallest area here. And we do often get a question on how do we prune these plants in here? And it is quite challenging to prune the very tall trees. So for the most part, when we're doing lower things and things that we can do from a lift or a ladder, those we can do ourselves. But when we get to a tree like the Kpop tree, we call in our city foresters to help us because they have equipment that allows them to actually get up and hang from the ceiling and the beams and help us with these trees. I'm not sure if you can see the point where it's cut right in the middle of the tree there. That was cut 2 years ago, and that's how much it's grown since then. So this is a very, very fast growing tree. It wants to be 100 feet tall, so we end up chopping it down kind of in half every couple, 2 or 3 years, and then it resprouts and grows again. So it's very, very tough tree, and but it's an interesting feat to try to keep up with the growth and the patterns of pruning that are needed in here. So as we finish off, I'll maybe point out our farm area. This is supposed to represent a sustainable farm like somebody might have in a tropical forest. So we have a number of interesting plants in here. We've got cacao, we've got avocado, we've got a banana actually, and I think if you can get a picture of this banana, you can see that we actually have some fruit up in that stalk there. And what's kind of nice about this exhibit is when we do have amounts of pruning material, we can give that to the keepers to use for enrichment for their animals, because we don't use any pesticides in here. It's safe to give those things to the animals. So once that's done fruiting, actually a banana, that whole stalk will be done, and we'll have to chop it off. So we can chop that up and give the whole thing, including the fruit, to the animals. And actually what's kind of neat is right next to it, you can see the next banana coming up. There's a little tiny sprout there. So once this is down, it'll take another year or so, and that little sprout will be another banana, and it should fruit in about a year for us. So it takes probably about 2,000 to 2,500 gallons of water every week to water in here. We do a full watering once a week. We alternate between fertilizing and watering. So it fertilizes, we get fertilizing done every other week. And then in between, we also spot water twice a week. So basically the whole room, all in all, gets watered fully twice a week. And it definitely requires that all year. In the summer because it's sunny, in the winter because the heat comes on and kind of dries it out then too. So we're in here working many days a week with grooming and cleaning, and then and the watering that needs to be done. So if you all have any questions, I hope you will put them in the comments and we'll try to get an answer to you. And I really want to say thank you and look forward to seeing you here at Como, and have an awesome day.